The lights inside Calloway's Auto and Repair came on at 5:15 every morning, and most days nobody noticed. The shop sat on the far end of Millbrook Avenue in Denton, Ohio, a narrow building wedged between a tire distributor and a shuttered hardware store that hadn't sold anything since 2009. The sign above the door had lost its second L sometime around 2017, so it read Calloway's now, and the man who owned the place had never bothered to fix it. He drove a '94 Ford Ranger with a cracked passenger mirror and wore the same canvas jacket most days, olive green, fraying at the left cuff, a stripe of dried grease along the sleeve that no amount of washing ever fully removed. His name was Edward Marsh. He was 53 years old, widowed, and had a daughter named Iris, who was 9, and who sat at the small wooden desk in the back office every afternoon after school, doing her homework while her father worked on whatever had come in that day. She usually had apple juice in a thermos and a bag of pretzels. She kept her colored pencils in a coffee can that had once held dark roast, and she drew pictures of horses in the margins of her assignments because she loved horses and had never owned one and didn't complain about it. Those were the facts of Edward Marsh's life from the outside. From the outside, that was all there was. Diane Coulter had been with Edward for 2 years and 3 months when she decided she was done. She told him on a Tuesday evening in March, standing in the kitchen of his house on Sycamore Lane, while Iris was at her grandmother's for the week. She had rehearsed this, or something close to it. She kept her arms folded across her chest and looked slightly past his left shoulder when she spoke, because looking directly at him when she said these things felt too hard, and she had already decided the hard part was finished. "I'm not unhappy, Edward," she said. "I just think we want different things." He was standing at the counter with a dish towel in one hand and a glass in the other, and he looked at her for a moment without speaking. He set the glass down carefully. "Different things," he said. "I want more. I'm not ashamed of that." She shifted her weight. "I've been seeing someone. I wanted to be honest with you about it." The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, someone's dog was barking at something. Edward put the dish towel on the counter and said, "Okay, just that." Okay, she had expected something else. Maybe not a scene, because Edward Marsh was not a scene kind of man, but something more than one word. She felt briefly, irrationally annoyed by it. "His name is Gregory," she said, and she wasn't sure why she said it because she hadn't planned to. "Gregory Shale. He's a partner at Fairmont Capital." Edward nodded slowly, the way he did when a customer described problem with an engine he hadn't looked at yet. Patient, taking it in, not showing what he thought. "I hope you're happy," he said. And then he picked up the dish towel again and finished drying the glass. Diane stood there a moment longer. Then she gathered her coat from the back of the chair and left. She drove home with the radio off, feeling lighter than she'd expected, and a little strange about how light she felt. And then she stopped thinking about it, because Gregory had texted her, and he was funny and confident, and knew which restaurants had good tables, and next Saturday he was taking her to Columbus for a weekend at the Worthington, and she had been looking forward to that for 3 weeks. She told her friend Patrice about it over lunch the next day. "He was kind, honestly," Diane said, pulling apart a piece of bread. "Didn't make it a whole thing. Very dignified, I guess. He owns a car shop," Patrice said, not unkindly. "I know. And Gregory is a capital partner." "I know," Diane said again. Patrice reached over and squeezed her hand. "You deserve nice things." Diane smiled and poured more water into her glass, and did not think about Edward standing at the kitchen counter with the dish towel, not looking the way she'd expected. The night she left, Edward finished washing the dishes and turned off the kitchen light and walked down the hallway to Iris's room and stood in the doorway for a while. The room smelled like her, crayons and strawberry shampoo, and the faint cedar of the wooden toy chest his wife, Nora, had painted white the summer before she got sick. Iris had stuck glow-in-the-dark stars to the ceiling in no particular pattern. They weren't glowing now because it was still light outside. He sat down on the edge of the bed and didn't turn on the lamp. He wasn't angry. He had tried to locate some anger and found it wasn't there. What he found instead was something quieter and harder to name, a tiredness that had been accumulating for a long while, and a specific loneliness that had nothing to do with Diane. It had been there long before her. It had been there since the February morning 4 years ago, when he drove home from the hospital alone in a light snow. He sat there for a little while. Then he got up, went to bed, and set his alarm for 5. The call came on a Thursday morning in April. 12 days after Diane left, Edward was underneath a 2018 Chevy Silverado when his phone rang on the workbench. He slid out, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked at the screen. He didn't recognize the number, but the area code was from Fairfield County, and he knew 2 people in Fairfield County. His cousin Teddy, whom he hadn't spoken to in 6 years, and his uncle. His uncle's name was Gordon Marsh. Edward stared at the screen for one more ring, then answered. The voice that came through wasn't Gordon's. It was a woman's, measured, precise, the voice of someone accustomed to delivering information carefully. Mr. Marsh, my name is Helen Price. I'm a senior associate at Whitmore & Dunn in Bridgeport. I'm calling because I represent the estate of Gordon Allen Marsh. A brief pause. I'm very sorry for your loss. Edward stood still. Gordon Marsh had died on a Monday, apparently. A stroke, the woman said. Sudden, no prolonged illness. He had been 71 years old and had lived alone in the house in Westport for the past 11 years, since his second wife had gone back to her family in Portland and he had declined to follow. There are matters related to the estate that require your attention in person, Helen Price said. Would you be available to come to our offices next week? Edward thought about the Silverado. He thought about the brake job on the Subaru he had promised by Friday. He thought about Iris's spring concert on the 14th, which he had marked on the kitchen calendar in red marker. I can come Wednesday, he said. He drove to Bridgeport on Wednesday in the Ranger, with the window cracked because the heat was starting to work on him, and he didn't want to arrive somewhere that required arriving looking worse than he already would. He wore the better of his 2 collared shirts, the dark blue one, and the wool blazer he'd bought for Nora's funeral and worn twice since. The offices of Whitmore & Dunn occupied the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. The receptionist looked at him briefly before her expression resettled into professional neutrality. Helen Price was a composed woman in her late 40s who shook his hand and led him into a conference room with a view of the harbor. She set a document on the table in front of him, thick, bound with a paper clip, the words Last Will and Testament of Gordon Allen Marsh across the top. Your uncle spoke of you often, she said. I didn't know that, Edward said. He was a private man. She settled her hands on the table. Mr. Marsh, your uncle's estate includes residential property in Westport and in Sarasota, a portfolio of private holdings, and his controlling stake in Harland Industrial Group. She paused. The current valuation of the company as of last quarter is approximately $94 billion. The room was very quiet. Edward looked at the document on the table. He looked at the harbor through the window. A container ship was moving slowly across the middle distance. He left it to me, Edward said. The full controlling stake, yes, along with the remainder of the estate. Another pause. There is a condition. There was always a condition with Gordon. Edward had understood this about his uncle, even when he was young. The man never gave anything cleanly. Not because he was cruel, but because he believed that things given without terms were things not truly received. The condition was this. Edward was required to assume active operational leadership of Harland Industrial Group for a minimum of 90 days. During that period, he was not to disclose his identity as the new owner to any staff member below the executive committee level. He was to join the company in an operational capacity, any capacity of his choosing, observe the business from within, and make whatever decisions he saw fit at the end of the period. If he declined or failed to complete the 90 days, the estate would pass to a charitable foundation. The company would be dissolved. He wanted you to know it first, Helen Price said, before anyone else, he said. She glanced at her notes. He said you were the only one who ever talked to him like he was just a man. Edward drove back to Denton on I-76 with the window still cracked and the radio off. Iris had a soccer game at 4:30. He didn't think about $90 billion. He thought about whether he'd remembered to put her shin guards in her bag. He talked to no one about it for 4 days. On the 5th day, he called his sister Vera, who lived in Akron and was the only other person alive who had known Gordon Marsh personally. He told her the basic facts over the phone. She was quiet for a long time. Edward, she said, I know, 90, I know. Another silence. Then, what are you going to do? I'm going to finish the Subaru first, he said. Then I don't know. He took the job. He called Helen Price on a Monday morning and told her. She said she would have the introductory arrangements made within 2 weeks. She did not sound surprised. He made arrangements for Iris to stay with Vera in Akron from Monday through Friday, coming home on weekends. Iris asked why. He told her there was some work he had to do that was a little far away for a while. She thought about this and then asked if he would still be home for her soccer games on Saturdays. "As many as I can," he said. "Can you come to all of them? I'll try for all of them," he said. She went back to her homework. After a moment, she said, "Dad, what does industrial mean?" "Like machines," he said. "Manufacturing, building things." "Oh," she chewed her pencil. "That makes sense." He wasn't sure what she meant by that, but he didn't ask. Harland Industrial Group's headquarters was in Cleveland, which was close enough that the drive wasn't punishing, but far enough that he kept the apartment Helen's team had arranged for him during the weekdays. It was on the 9th floor of a building near the lake. The furniture was clean and beige and anonymous. He bought a coffee maker the second day and a small cactus for the windowsill and didn't add much else. The position they had arranged for him was in operations. Specifically, a regional supply chain coordinator role that was unglamorous enough that no one on the executive floor would think to look at it. He wore his own clothes to work, the canvas jacket, a pair of clean chinos, work boots, because he owned 2 pairs of shoes and those were the more presentable. He drove himself. He took the stairs. His direct supervisor was a woman named Bettori, too sharp-eyed, the kind of person who had been underestimated at meetings for long enough that she had stopped performing patience about it. She showed him the department on his first morning, walking quickly and assuming he could keep up, which he appreciated. "Vendors, warehousing, distribution, logistics," she said, moving through the fluorescent corridors. "We're behind on the Dayton contracts because someone in procurement made a beautiful mistake in January, and we've been managing the fallout. I need someone who can read a logistics spreadsheet and not panic." "I can do that," Edward said. She looked at him. He was older than most of the department by a decade at least. He wore a jacket with a stain on the cuff. "Where were you before this?" she said. "I ran my own shop," he said. "What kind?" "Auto repair." She looked at him for another half-second. Then she handed him a stack of files. "The Dayton vendor summary is on top," she said. "Get through it today and tell me what you see." He got through it in 2 hours and wrote her a 2-page summary with 3 specific recommendations, handwritten on a legal pad because he didn't yet have access to the system. She read it at her desk while he waited in the doorway, and when she looked up, her expression had shifted slightly. "How'd you find the back-ordering gap in Section F?" she said. "It's what I would have done," he said. "When someone can't get a part in time, they substitute and hide the substitution. I've seen it a lot." She put down the summary. "Sit down, Ed." He sat. "What exactly are you doing here?" she said, not unkindly, just directly. "Working," he said. "Same as you." He spent the first month watching. He watched the way decisions moved through the building. Which ones got made quickly, and which ones got buried in consensus until they died. He watched which managers were straightforward and which ones performed competence rather than demonstrating it. He watched the executive floor from the stairs and the lobby, and the way people talked about the board in the break room. He ate lunch at his desk most days, or sometimes outside on the concrete steps off the loading dock if the weather was decent. He brought a sandwich from the deli on East 9th. He called Iris every evening at 7 and heard about her day in Akron, what Vera had made for dinner, what happened in gym class, whether the creek behind Vera's house had any crayfish yet. "Did you see any machines today?" Iris asked one evening. "Some," he said. "A lot of spreadsheets." "I thought you were going to see machines." "Eventually." "Okay," she said, satisfied with this. He began to understand what Gordon had known. The company was profitable on the surface and troubled underneath. The kind of trouble that doesn't show up in quarterly reports right away but accumulates silently in vendor relationships and logistics margins and the slow departure of people who knew what they were doing. Someone at a senior level was managing numbers in a way that made one division look healthier than it was, and Edward spent 3 evenings in the apartment working through spreadsheets until he found where the accounting bent. He wrote it up and said nothing to anyone. Yet, he drove home to Denton on Friday evenings and picked up Iris from Vera's house, and they stopped at the diner on Route 9 because Iris liked the hot chocolate there, and because it was their thing, had been since she was 4. And they sat across from each other in the corner booth while the Friday evening crowd moved around them, and Iris told him about her week in great detail and he listened to all of it. One Friday night she said, "Out of nowhere, Dad, are you lonely?" He looked at her. She was looking at her hot chocolate. "Sometimes," he said. "Are you? A little bit?" she said. "But I like Aunt Vera's dog." "That helps," he said. "Yeah." She looked up. "I think things will be okay." "I think so too," he said. She picked up her mug with both hands and drank. Outside, a pickup truck moved through the parking lot, its headlights sweeping briefly across the window. The second month, he began to move. He flagged the logistics gap to the board, through Helen with documentation. He recommended Becca Torres for the regional director role she had been quietly, persistently overlooked for. He initiated a quiet review of the accounting irregularities he had found, through proper channels without publicity. The man responsible for the accounting problem was a senior VP named Collins. Edward never learned the first name, only Collins, the way certain people in institutions are only ever known by their last name. Collins was gone by the first week of the third month. He was not given a send-off. Becca Torres was promoted. She called Edward into her office on the day it was announced, before the email went out. "I don't know if you had anything to do with this," she said. "You did the work?" Edward said. She watched him for a moment. She was beginning to have a question she hadn't asked yet. He could see it in the way she spoke to him. "Ed," she said. "Who are you?" "I'm the supply chain coordinator," he said. For now, she repeated. "Things change," he said, and he meant it as something true and not unkind. The story of how his identity became known has two versions, the version that got reported and the version that actually happened. The reported version is that an assistant at a competing firm connected some paperwork from the estate and made a call. The actual version is simpler. Edward drove to the executive floor on a Tuesday morning in his 61st day and walked into the boardroom, where the 7 remaining senior leaders were assembled for their weekly meeting and sat down at the head of the table. There was a silence. The chief operating officer, a man named Frederick Albright, who had been with the company for 19 years and had excellent instincts, looked at Edward, the canvas jacket, the work boots, the creased legal pad, and said, slowly, "You're Gordon's nephew." "I am," Edward said. Another silence. "You've been here," Albright said. 2 months, Edward said. "Give or take." Albright sat back and looked at the ceiling for a moment, and then he laughed, a short, full, genuine laugh, and shook his head. "Gordon always said the family was surprising," he said. "I didn't know what to make of that until right now." The others did not laugh, but they listened. Edward spoke for 40 minutes, which was the longest he had spoken consecutively in his professional life. He told them what he had seen and what he intended to do about it. He was measured and specific, and gave credit where it was due, and did not soften the parts that needed to be said directly. When he finished, the room was quiet in the particular way. Rooms get quiet when something important has just settled. "Do you need anything from us?" Albright said. "An office with a working printer," Edward said. "The one in supply chain jams." It became news, eventually, the kind of low-key business news that ripples through regional and then national finance coverage and generates a certain number of takes about family legacy and quiet power, and whether you can ever really know a person. There was a photograph taken of him outside the building. He had forgotten to change out of the canvas jacket. Diane Coulter saw the photograph. She was at Gregory's apartment in Columbus when it came up on his phone. He followed some financial news account, and he held it up and said, "Hey, have you heard of Harland Industrial? This is a wild story." And she looked at the photograph, and something dropped out from under her in a way that is difficult to describe but is familiar to anyone who has ever understood something too late. She sat with it for a week before she did anything. Then she drove to Denton on a Saturday morning. Because she knew Edward was home on Saturdays, she parked in front of the house on Sycamore Lane. She sat in the car for a little while first. Then she went to the door and knocked. He answered it himself. He was wearing his old canvas jacket over a flannel shirt, which was a thing he wore on Saturdays when he didn't have to be anywhere. He looked at her without particular surprise. "Diane," he said. "Hi, Edward," she said. Behind him in the living room, Iris was on the couch watching something with the horses in it, not paying attention to the door. "Can I come in?" Diane said. "What do you need?" he said. Quietly, not unkindly, but honestly. She looked at him. She had thought about what she would say, and now she couldn't find the right first word, which is its own kind of answer. "I wanted to," she started. "Diane," he said her name gently. "It's okay. I don't have anything hard to say to you. He glanced back at Iris, who still wasn't paying attention. I don't think this is going to be that conversation. What conversation? She said, but she knew. The one where things go back, he said. She stood there another moment. The morning was cool and bright, and a neighbor's sprinkler was going somewhere down the block. You could have told me, she said, at some point. He thought about that. Maybe, he said. But I don't think it would have changed what happened. I think you wanted something I wasn't, and I think that's still true. I'm still the same person. She didn't have an answer for that, because it was accurate and both of them knew it. She drove back to Columbus with the radio on, talking herself into and out of various versions of how she felt. And eventually she turned it off and just drove, because sometimes that's the only thing left to do. On the morning of the 93rd day, Edward Marsh drove to the building on East 9th in Cleveland, went up to the 14th floor. His floor now, the office with the working printer. Signed 3 sets of documents with Helen Price, and then drove to Denton in the afternoon to pick up Iris from Vera's. They stopped at the diner on Route 9. Iris had hot chocolate. He had coffee. She told him about a project she'd done on Ohio state birds, which he had not known was assigned, and which she had somehow completed with minimal supervision and a lot of confidence. What's the Ohio state bird? He asked. Cardinal, she said, the northern cardinal. The male ones are red and the female ones are kind of brownish red. I think the females are underrated. Probably right, he said. She drank her hot chocolate. Outside, the evening was coming down early the way it does in Ohio in October, the sky going from gray to dark without much ceremony. Dad, Iris said, are we rich now? He looked at her. She was looking at him very directly, the way she did when she had been waiting to ask something for a while. We're okay, he said. We were okay before, she said. Yes, he said. We were. She nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already worked out. Then she asked for a refill on the hot chocolate, which she got. And they stayed until the place started filling up with the dinner crowd. And then they drove home to Sycamore Lane through the Ohio dark, Iris asleep in the passenger seat before they hit the highway, the old Ranger doing what it had always done. The shop on Millbrook Avenue was still there when he drove past it. The sign still read Calloway's. He'd been meaning to fix the letter for years, and he still hadn't. And maybe that was the most honest thing about him, that he noticed what was broken and didn't always rush to change it. Some things could wait. Some things were fine the way they were if you looked at them right. He turned onto Sycamore Lane and pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment with the engine off, listening to Iris breathe in the seat beside him. Then he carried her inside, put her to bed, and turned off the lights.